Okay. How's everybody doing? Good? Everybody good? Yeah. How's your elbows? Woo! All right. I'm going to run through a couple things real quick because I know we have a bunch of, we have some new people. We have a lot of new people, which is awesome. Obviously, we've invited the 6th grade specifically for our topic, so I'm glad that you guys are here. But I'm also excited to see a lot of other new faces as well. So real quick, I typically have a football up here, which is more dangerous than this dodgeball, and it's called our mutual trust ball. And a lot of times when we have a topic or a conversation, I get up here, and a lot of times I will encourage questions and interactions. When I do that, I expect you guys to, I trust that you guys will stay on topic. The word we use is keep it pertinent, which means, does anybody know what it means? Ryan? I knew Ryan would know. Right. Relative. There you go. Good job. Good job. Relevant to what we're talking about so that we don't go way off place. So I have to trust that you're going to do that, and then you guys trust that I will do my best to deliver my message and then let you have some fun. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit longer on my own, so there's not going to be a whole lot of discussion here in this first part. Most of you guys know that we have the topic, I think most of you guys know that the topic for tonight is going to be a conversation between evolution and intelligent design, or creationism. So my first question I want to throw out there is, does everybody know what evolution is? All right, do you know what evolution is? Raise your hand. Okay, some do, some don't. All right, good. We got kind of a mix. Okay, this one may be a little less familiar with you. I don't know, we'll be surprised. How many people know what intelligent design or creationism is? All right, I would say that's less hands. Some of you guys kind of think maybe you know what it is, but you're not real sure. Okay, well, let me first tell you there is a ton of information that I could share with you on these subjects. In fact, I could spend the next couple of weeks up here talking on this particular subject, nonstop, probably. So I'm going to try to keep it somewhat simple and somewhat basic. At the end, if you have any questions on anything, feel free to ask and we'll discuss at that time. The reason that I've decided to do this topic, most of you guys are aware, at least the 6th grade in Bennington is right now studying evolution. At least Allie's class is studying evolution, I know for sure. So some of you may have studied it already. Some of you may be studying it now. Some of you, if you haven't, you will be studying it. I can assure you, at some point in high school you will study it, and in college you will study it. So you will definitely go over evolution at some point in your scholastic career. However, intelligent design and creationism, pretty sure, is there anybody in here that studied that in school? No, I don't think so. Right? Okay, everybody in here that goes to a public school is faced with the same challenge. Part of the reason that we're having this tonight, and it's not talked about in public school, there's really two reasons. I think that creationism and intelligent design is not taught in the public school. And the first reason is it's automatically assigned to religion. Creationism is automatically tied to God. Intelligent design, even though there are those that will argue that intelligent design can happen by aliens, that's actually a theory that exists and some people believe it, for the most part, intelligent design theories are tied again to God and religion. There has been quite the challenge in our school systems for some time, our public school systems, regarding religion in public schools. And many people, probably most of you guys, have heard that it's unconstitutional to mix, there's a separation of religion and state. Anybody heard that term, a separation of religion and state? Okay. Some of you guys have. And people will claim that is in the Constitution. It's actually not in the Constitution anywhere, but it's widely claimed to be. It was actually in a letter that Thomas Jefferson, then as president, wrote to a Baptist association, explaining to them at the time his concern with the government controlling their religion, not the other way around. So it was originally intended as a protection for you guys, for us, to have freedom of religion without being forced by the government to choose certain, to be blocked or to be kept from certain religions or to choose certain religions. And it's kind of gotten twisted and it's kind of gotten used in different ways. And it's become basically in the United States to where religion, God is rarely taught. It's definitely not taught as a mandatory class. There are some schools that will do it as an elective class where you can teach and learn about these things. But students can't be required to have to learn it because of its ties to religion and to God. And I will say Kansas is actually a state that's it's a lot better than most. I mean, I actually, you're in 6th grade in Bennington, you probably recognize this. If you've been through 6th grade in Bennington, you might recognize this. Or maybe other people have the same book. I don't know. Anyway, that's a science book. I've had a chance to read through it. When I was informed that evolution was going to be studied, I want to read through it and kind of check it out. And I'm actually, for the most part, I'm okay with a lot of things that are in there because of the pretense that it's done. There are some things that I have some issues with. But for the most part, I'm okay with a lot of it. The problem becomes when you're only taught one side of a theory. And here's the second issue as to why you're not taught intelligent design or creationism in school in science class. Does anybody actually know what the definition of science is? Hard? Amen, brother. Wayne? The study of? Okay, that's good. Science actually derived originally, the Greek word was, I think, scientia is how it's pronounced, which meant knowledge. Okay, but the definition has changed over time. And now basically science means the study and observance of natural and material things in our world. Okay, which that creates a problem when we want to include something such as creationism or intelligent design into science. Because it takes into factor something beyond the natural. It takes into factor God, which would be supernatural. And that is why most scientists have a problem, because it doesn't involve the natural. It doesn't involve the material world. And it's something that they simply can't explain by science. So those are the two main reasons. And I would say, and I hope that everybody completely understands that I love the school systems that we have here. I love the faculty and the staff that we have in place. I think we are incredibly blessed to be where we are in this little area of the country, to have, you know, the teachers and the faculty and the staff that we have and the schools that we have, because I think they are, I think they're open, and I think they're more willing to help. And I honestly, I love where a majority of them stand in their faith. I mean, I know personally where a lot of them stand. We have teachers that are here helping right now. I think that's phenomenal. So I feel very blessed to be where we're at. But understand, I also know that the difficulties and the challenges that schools face to introduce a topic like this, if they were to do so in school. So I'm going to touch on some things here a little bit. First of all, we talked about evolution and intelligent design. I understand both of those are theories. You guys know what a theory is? Right? Okay, most of you probably have an idea what theory. A theory is simply, I mean, in part, it's an estimation, it's a guess, it's a thought, it's a belief based on evidence and observances. You look at something and you determine that, like, for example, I have a theory that maybe some of you are bored. I don't know, it's just a theory based on relevance or based on what I observance. I'm kidding. So theories are based off of those type of things. Understand that evolution is a theory. It's not a fact, and it's never been proven. Now, you will hear time and time and time again that evolution is a fact, and it is true. There's been no proof to determine that evolution is actually true. Okay. One of the things that affect our opinions on things, I mean, obviously we have a debate between two possible reasons for the origin of life: intelligent design and evolution. And a lot of times what affects our opinions is our worldview. Anybody in here know what a worldview is? Maybe. It's kind of a big word. Probably haven't heard of it. Yep, some of you guys have. Good. Your worldview is basically your interpretation of the world and how it exists. It's your thought process. Many of us in here have a Christian worldview. I hope most of us, I hope all of us in here have a Christian worldview, that our world exists because the God of our Bible created it. And that's what we believe. There are those who have an atheist worldview, which means that they don't believe that there's a God. don't believe that any God exists. And so their worldview predetermines that intelligent design, at least from a God perspective, is impossible because God doesn't exist. So a lot of times those predetermined worldviews will affect, bless you, you all right? You need a Kleenex or anything? No, you're good? All right. Those worldviews will help affect the way we look at evidence and the way we present our case. As scientists present evolution, most generally in a fact, and you'll see here in a little bit, they will take evidence and they'll twist it, or they'll change it, or they'll leave out pieces, or be vague about certain parts of that evidence to support their case. So we'll look at that a little bit as well. One of the things that I did notice as I looked at your science book, and you guys may have noticed this as well, and I certainly, as I said, I appreciate the fact that oftentimes you will see as you read through there, it says scientists think, or scientists believe, or you hear words like may, or might, or could. Okay? You guys understand that those words, what does, if you think of, first thing, scientists believe, what's the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear the phrase? I know, I was going to ask, I changed my mind. When I think of the phrase scientists believe, the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, every scientist there is understands that this is true. That's what I think of when I first hear scientists believe. We got to understand, first of all, who are those scientists that believe this? Is it every single scientist? What do you guys think? Right? The two they asked? I would say it's more than the two that they asked, but I think you would also be surprised at the number of scientists who don't agree with this. In fact, I have a list on my laptop of over 3,000 scientists who have signed a petition saying that there are serious issues with Darwin's theory of evolution. So there's 3,000 scientists that don't agree, that don't believe that this is true. So I think it can be misconceiving, it can be misleading to say that scientists believe certain things. So I want you to always keep an open mind. I think it's incredibly important when you guys are hearing something, and I've said this before, is that you keep an open mind with what you're hearing, but also to seek the truth for yourself. Don't necessarily always take things as they're given to you, because sometimes they're not necessarily given, as I said earlier, fully in the right way or with the right meaning or in an open mind. A lot of times it's designed to sway you in a certain direction. So let's start. We're going to talk a little bit about evolution. Anybody seen that picture before? Yeah, probably most of you guys, right? According to that picture, what do you guys assume? Beef jerky? Sasquatch? That's not a Sasquatch, Markel. All right, yes. Okay, I'll tell you what. We will ask and answer questions later. All right? Okay? So, but here's my first question. What do you guys interpret from that picture? Logan? Okay, good. Yeah, Landon? We came from apes. That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, that's essentially what the theory of evolution says, is that everything that we have evolved from one common ancestor. Okay? So we can go back through time over millions and billions of years, and we can come up with one common answer. Do you have a question or? Okay. We're evolving to more civilized? Maybe. I told Mr. Arnold earlier that I contemplated how many people watched football this last weekend. Okay? All right, most of you, wow, that's phenomenal. Okay, I told Mr. Arnold earlier that I contemplated how many people saw the interview of Richard Sherman at the end of the game. All right? That's an example that we obviously are not evolving, right? That guy is back. We're not evolving. All right. Anyway. So let's kind of go through this a little bit. We're going to make a couple assumptions. Most generally, everybody agrees that the universe started with a Big Bang. There are some other theories out there, but most generally, we're going to start with the Big Bang. Okay? Does everybody know what the Big Bang is? Okay. Fire away. Tell me what the Big Bang is. Okay, not the TV show. All right. See, this is why I don't ask questions. You guys are learning real fast. All right, hold on. I got it. The Big Bang is basically the theory of how the universe started. Billions of years ago, it started with the Big Bang. And we're going to not start both premises because something had to happen to cause the Big Bang. Anybody know what caused the Big Bang? No? An atom touching another atom. What's that? What? Speck of dust? A piece of dust? Here's what you're going to find, okay? And this is what scientists have basically agreed that they have no idea what caused it or what was before the Big Bang. It's basically nothing. Okay, nothing exists according to evolution prior to the Big Bang. So we had nothing, and then nothing became something and created a Big Bang. Are you still with me? I know we're taking a leap here, but it's okay. All right, so after the Big Bang, then we had something. We had non-living matter, which basically formed into the Earth. The Earth became a planet. And then with volcanic activity, with heat and cool and lightning, basically there was moisture on the planet. Okay, and then chemicals from space got into these lakes that formed because of the moisture. And then it's believed anyway that probably lightning maybe struck what they call a primordial soup, which is basically this soup full of chemicals. And then something caused a reaction within that primordial soup that spawned the building blocks, amino acids, things that we need for life. And eventually over billions of years, so I don't know how many billions of years out now, billions and billions and billions of years, life formed out of this primordial soup. So we've gone from nothing to something, to water on a rock, to non-life, to life. And then it gets better, because Darwin's theory of evolution is that single-cell bacteria that formed, then eventually evolved into everything that we see today through natural selection. You guys know what natural selection is? Okay. Natural selection basically means that certain things that happen, certain things that determine who lives or who dies, who survives to recreate and to continue their species by natural selection are best fitted to survive, and therefore they survive. One of the things that I've always got, anybody familiar with bacteria? Is there any place that bacteria can't grow? In copper? Anybody have any idea what the temperature extremes that bacteria can survive in? Right. Here's my question, all right? How many people froze on the way walking here and I know several Bennington people or whatever, right? It's freezing cold. Bacteria would have been like, this is no problem. How did, in the process of us adapting, evolving, and improving, did we lose the ability to adapt to different heat and cold? I'd like to know that, because I would like to have that back. Okay. As I'm looking over my notes here. Okay. Do you guys have any idea? There's some problems, obviously, with this theory of going from nothing to something and eventually non-life to life, right? We have a few issues that are pretty hard to explain, at least from an evolutionist standpoint. Do you guys agree with that? Okay. A single-cell animal, then eventually evolving into you guys. Do you have any idea how many cells are in your body? Anybody have a clue? Okay. Hold on. This is the mutual trust ball. So this is how this works, all right? You raise your hand, I throw you the ball, try not to drill anybody in front of you, okay? And then you have an opportunity to share, all right? Okay. How many cells, Ryan, quit intercepting. I'm sorry. How many cells do you think are in the human body? Infinity. How many cells are in our body? Oh, you guys gotta catch it. See, that's how I get in trouble, is when you don't catch it and I drill somebody in the face. More than 10? Okay. Everybody put your hands down. Put your hands down. Put your hands down. Okay, please, for a second. All right, can somebody give me a serious, true estimation on how many cells they believe are in the body? Thank you. Okay, she said just below 4 million. 4 million is her answer. So, okay, if you think there are more than 4 million cells in the human body, stand up. Okay, if you think there are more than 10 million cells in the human body, stay standing. More than 10 million. Okay, if you think there are more than 100 million cells in the human body, stay standing. If you think there's less, sit down. Follow Claudia. They're all watching you, Claudia. No pressure. Okay. If you think there are more than 1 billion cells in the human body, remain standing. All right, how about more than 10 billion? How about more than 100 billion cells? You guys are, okay, all right, okay. So, if you're wrong, okay, if you guys are standing and you're wrong, I'm going to make you run around the church, okay? All right. Okay, all right. Have a seat. Now, it's actually impossible to know the exact number of cells that are in our body for different reasons. But hold on. But the guesses have been everywhere from ridiculous amounts. But from what I found in my study and research is most commonly, people agree, there are somewhere between 70 trillion and 100 trillion cells in your body right now. Okay. Do you guys know who Charles Darwin is, correct? Everybody know who Charles Darwin is? Alexis? Levi? It's not right? That's a good point. Sam. There's no God. That's true. All right. Brad? Does say that humans are animals. All right. Let me explain you something. Hold on. All right, you ready? Here's what really baffles me on this tree of life. Why is it there's absolutely no animals between the root of the tree and the tips of the branches? If we evolved in a process from a single cell organism to what we are today, isn't it logical to think that there should be hundreds, thousands, even millions of different species that are between us and what we evolved from out there? Yet the tree of life has none of them. Scientists use, obviously they're going to use genetics. We'll talk about genes and DNA, and we talked a little bit about cells earlier, but they also use fossils to prove evolution, or to at least attempt to prove evolution. One of the things that obviously, and Darwin had a huge issue with this, was the complete lack of what are called transitional forms, and those fossils of animals in between. Some of you guys may recognize from this book that there are some transitional forms listed in here, transitional fossils. As you look up there, you may recognize that animal as the Pakicetus. The Pakicetus. You guys don't know the Pakicetus? Well, I'll start by, we'll get a little bit further. Sixth graders in science, you guys are maybe you aren't to this part of your chapter yet. Okay, the Pakicetus, we found some evidence of a Pakicetus, which is supposedly a transitional form of the whale. Okay, this was what the whale evolved from. Scientists theorize that all life, as we talked earlier, started in the ocean, right? Okay, we talked about that. And they say that eventually life evolved to walking on land. And then science theorized that because the whale is a mammal that lives in the ocean, it must have evolved from a land walking animal back to a whale in the ocean. So this Pakicetus is one of those transitional forms that they believe the whale evolved from. Now I want to share with you, you see the picture on the right of the skull? Okay, see the shaded gray areas? That is all that was found of Pakicetus, is what is shaded in gray. So they took the shaded gray area, a bit of a skull and a bit of a jaw, and they created the animal you see on the left. I think there's a little bit of a jump in assumption there. Would you agree? Okay. Eventually later, this is Pakicetus again. Eventually later, they found a few more bones, and they realized, oh, shoot, we were wrong about the Pakicetus. Wasn't exactly that animal that we see on the left that we first thought it was. No, in fact, it looks more like the animal on the bottom right. But you know what? Since we already said that it was evolved into part of the whale, that it is a creature that the whale evolved from, we're going to stick with that story. But this was just an earlier land form of the whale. So we're going to roll with that, and we'll find some more pieces that fit in between. But we stuck with that. So the animal on the bottom right is the drawing that you see as Pakicetus in your science books. The skeleton above it is what has actually been found complete. All right, what is this animal? Anybody know what this guy is? It is not a platypus. No. It is, all right, hold up. Are you guys ready? It is called the Ambulocetus. This is the Ambulocetus, all right? Again, another animal that our whale has evolved from, all right? Okay, that looks like a pretty scary looking something, doesn't it? Okay, there is a, what's that? You know, it's funny because I kind of thought the same thing, actually. There's a picture right there of Ambulocetus and Pakicetus together. This is what you will see in science books of the full skeletons. Of course, you guys already know that Pakicetus, we don't have his full skeleton. And here's what we found of Ambulocetus. You see the skeleton on the bottom? That is what was found for Ambulocetus. That's what we have to build what we believe evolved into a whale. Okay? And you'll notice the bones that are up there in red, they were actually found 15 feet higher in the same location than what the rest of the bones. That's a great question. Okay? So we took Ambulocetus based on these bones that we found, and we've thrown him in as an earlier whale. The whales evolved into. Again, I think we're kind of taking a leap of faith there a little bit. Am I right? Okay. So I wanted to share those with you because you guys will see. I don't know how many of you will actually see this, but right page. But as you look through your book here, I'm going to show you a picture of what they have to teach you is Pakicetus and Ambulocetus. Okay? There's the books. Those pictures kind of probably look familiar because they look a lot like the ones that I just showed you. Right? At no point on this page does it actually show what was found of those two animals. I have a concern with that. I have an issue with that. So again, it goes back to sometimes some people will push an agenda based on what their previous or what their worldview is or what they think or what they believe. Okay. I did have a question. I asked Allie a couple things that maybe was going on that she thought and had questions of beforehand. And one of the things she said to me was, what about the vestigial hip bone in a whale? You guys may have heard that whales have a vestigial hip bone. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't know exactly what that thing is, but here's what I do know. It's a few centimeters long. You guys know how big a whale is? Okay. I struggle seeing it as a hip bone, but it's located in the whale by itself in the hip area. Now, I have read where it actually serves a purpose. Whether or not this is true, I don't know, because I haven't been able to confirm it with more than 2 sources. And both of those are intelligent design sources. So, who knows? But I have been told, or I've read, that hip bone is actually used for structure in the pelvic of a whale, and that it also helps with, it's different in males and females, and it helps with their reproductive organs. So anyway, I don't know that I have an answer for it, but I know that it's a much further jump for me to assume that it was a hip bone versus having those specific uses. Okay. All right. Let's should we jump to the other side? Intelligent design, creationism. Talk a little bit about that. All right. Okay. I think when I'm done, I think already we have enough evidence to be skeptical of Darwin's theory of evolution. I think that's pretty obvious. So do we have evidence to prove that there's a creator? And the first thing that I want to touch on is I've been talking evolution out of this book. Okay? This book was written in 2007. Okay? It's been rewritten I don't know how many times. But I can assure you that it's been written several times because there are often errors that need to be corrected. Scientists learn something new, and what they once said now needs to be changed. And we've seen it over the history. This book has changed constantly. In fact, I think there's some proof that we've went over. Some of the things that are in there from 2007 aren't necessarily accurate. Now, I'm going to share creationism and intelligent design, which a lot of my evidence is based on this book. This book was written, it's actually 66 different books. It was written by approximately 40 different authors. The oldest book in this Bible, was written about 3,500 years ago. It hasn't been changed or corrected in the last 3,500 years. The newest book in this Bible was written a little over 1,900 years ago. So we have a huge span of time, of history, and of what I believe to be proof and evidence of creation. You guys have read this. I don't know how many people have brought their book, but it's interesting. If you actually go to the very first page of the Bible, the first chapter of the Bible is called Genesis. Anybody know what Genesis means? The beginning. It does. I think that's kind of ironic. We can read the entire first chapter of Genesis, and it tells us how everything came to be. Now, I believe that we also have evidence outside of the Bible to back up what the Bible tells us. So, excuse me, we'll kind of run through. I was yelling too much during the game. All right, we're going to kind of run through. I went through the basis of how evolutionists believe that the beginning of the universe happened and all the way through. We're going to run through this real quick as to what, as a creationist, what I believe happened. First of all, before the Big Bang, what existed was God. The Bible clearly tells us that God was there in the beginning. The Bible also tells us that God has no beginning and no end. He is eternal. He has always existed and always will. Science struggles with explaining that because it's supernatural. But the Bible tells us that's the case. And then I believe that God created a Big Bang. Genesis chapter 1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's like a circle. It's a question for later. All right. So then we had the Big Bang, which God created. And then here's how the breakdown goes. You guys remember how the evolutionists went. But basically, so we've got the Big Bang in which God created what? The heavens and the earth, and then the skies, and then the seas, and then the land and the vegetations, the plants and the trees. I didn't know that rhymed. The sun, the moon, and the stars, the sea creatures, the birds, the land creatures, all by their kind, and then mankind. He made in their image, male and female, to rule over all the animals and plants. And then he rested, and here we are. Now, according to the Bible, God created all of this. So we're going to look a little bit at what does intelligent design or what does creation require? What does anybody know? What does it absolutely require? Yes, a creator. That's right. It requires a creator, God. I think sometimes we can tell. Evolution says that everything happened through random chance, through natural selection. The Bible tells us that God created it. He designed it specifically for a purpose. So we'll go back to the Big Bang. I've actually got an interesting quote here. Let me find it real quick. From Stephen Hawking, which says, you guys know who Stephen Hawking is? All right. He's a really smart guy. Stephen Hawking is a really smart guy. Stephen Hawking has estimated that if the rate of the universe's expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have recollapsed into a hot fireball. We wouldn't exist. That's how finely tuned it has to be. And we look around now and we realize that our world, our planet, our universe is incredibly finely tuned. From the gravitational pull to where we are located. If we were 10% closer to the sun, too hot, we wouldn't exist. If we were 10% further from the sun, too cold, wouldn't exist. I mean, there are over 30 absolute fine-tuned precision requirements within our planet and our universe in order for life to exist. I love this. This is great. Oh, snap. I'm ahead of myself. All right. What do you guys see? Mountain. All right. Anybody know how mountains were created? Somebody's going to say God. Let's earthquakes. All right. You guys can just. All right. Okay. They kind of happened, right? All right. What's that? Okay. When you look at those two pictures, do you have any question in your mind whether or not that one happened by accident or was done by a creator or a designer? I think it's pretty obvious that somebody designed that. That didn't happen randomly by chance in nature. All right, again, here's you some rocks. Right? You guys see any pattern there? Basically, the way to tell whether or not a designer exists is what's that? You just stare at it, and eventually something will come out of it in 3D. I'm kidding. That's not true. You can tell whether or not there's a requirement for a designer. One, whether or not you see a pattern. All right? Does something obviously have a pattern? Okay. That has a pattern. Two, is it recognizable to something else that we're aware of? That's not really recognizable to anything else. It's just rocks scattered. That, however, seems to be a pattern. They appear to be stacked. I think we can interpret that there was a designer that done those. Is there any question why do people have this? There's all kinds of crazy theories. Stonehenge. You guys know what Stonehenge is? All right? Is that naturally there? I mean, there's nobody, I think, in the world that really thinks that Stonehenge just naturally happened. It was put together, it was built, it was stacked. I mean, there's huge giant rocks on top of each other. Right? So obviously there's proof, there's evidence for a designer, for a creator. All right. That's a big number. Anybody know how big that? I don't even know how many zeros are on that number. But it's a big number. Okay. You want to talk about how complex? I'm gonna quit asking questions. How complex our life form is. Okay. Mathematician Sir Fred Hoyle said that the odds. He's a mathematician, so he knows odds. He knows numbers, right? He said that the odds of a single biopolymer necessary for life arising by chance without a creator is the same as 100,000 billion blind people solving a Rubik's Cube simultaneously. He said that the odds of life arising from a single biopolymer to have been happened by chance were the same odds as 100,000 billion blind people putting that Rubik's Cube together at the exact same time. I mean, I can't even tell you how mind-boggling that is. But that is what the theory of evolution was. And keep this in mind. That is one biopolymer necessary for life. And even the single or the simplest forms of life have hundreds of biopolymers. And that's just one. So if we took that times 100, that number's ridiculous. I'm not even going to go there. Hold on. All right. So obviously life is incredibly complex. We've talked a little bit about cells and DNA. I think as we look at different parts of us, look at the human eye. We have never been able to replicate the amazing capabilities of the human eye. My human eye can automatically adjust with zero blurring whether I look at Rihanna or I look at Mr. Arnold. Immediately, it's done. The human eye was one of Darwin's biggest challenges. In fact, he said it made him shudder and kept him up all night because he couldn't explain it through evolution. How could that evolve? The other challenge that he had is that it not only evolved in one species, but involved in multiple species across the board at the same time. Couldn't figure out how that was possible. So, a little bit about DNA real quick. Anybody know what irreducible complexity is? Anybody know what that means? Nope. It's a big word. I like throwing out big words. Makes me sound smart. Hey? Whether it's true or not. Irreducible complexity. Okay, when you reduce a fraction, what does that mean? You make it as small as you possibly can, right? To reduce a fraction down, you reduce it down to a certain extent. Okay? Irreducible complexity means that a specific thing is so complex it cannot be reduced anymore, like the human eye. There's nothing that we could do less than what we have. And that is a huge challenge in evolution, is that something so complex has to be that complex in order to function. During the course of evolution, as our eye is evolving, what are we seeing? Well, we can't see because our eye hasn't evolved. One of the challenges with evolution is the more complicated a system is, the longer it takes to evolve. Well, anybody familiar with human anatomy can tell you that the female reproductive organs are far more complicated than the male reproductive organs. So my question is, as we're evolving and as guys show up and we're set and ready to go because we've evolved much quicker because it's not nearly as complicated, how long did we have to wait for the females to evolve before we could actually produce offspring? Probably longer than what we would live. There are so many challenges with this, it's insane. So some facts on DNA real quick. I've got so much information, it's ridiculous that we could go over. But I want to throw out some DNA facts on you. Are you ready? Okay. First of all, each cell contains roughly 2 meters of DNA. That's about 6 feet, give or take. If you unraveled all of your DNA from all of your cells and laid out the DNA from end to end, the strand would stretch from the earth to the sun hundreds of times. Let's see, there was one that I really liked on here that I've got to find. Well, you guys know as base pairs within DNA, there are over 3 billion base pairs of DNA in our body. You often hear how we're so closely related to chimpanzees or whatever, at 96 or 98 or 94%, depending on who you're asking. At 3 billion base pairs, 96% I think leaves us about, I don't even know, 5 billion base pairs short. I'm doing really quick and probably terrible math, but it's a lot. Yeah. So I want to, like I said, there's a ridiculous amount of information that we could go in here, but I want to just real quick leave you guys with a few Bible verses. That is planet Earth. It's the only planet that has life that we're aware of. All right, fair enough. Okay, Isaiah 40:22. Most of you guys know we've talked about Isaiah before. Isaiah was a prophet in the Old Testament. Hey, listen up. Isaiah was a prophet in the Old Testament. He lived before the time of Jesus. Isaiah wrote this about 2,700 years ago. He wrote, in regards to God, he sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent to live in. A couple things that I often wonder is, one, how did Isaiah know that the earth was round, like a circle? Because the Bible is inspired by God. There were certain things that it blows my mind that these Old Testament and New Testament writers were aware of, that they could talk about. That's just unbelievable. The fact that he mentions he stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent. He's stretching and spreading. You guys know that the universe is still expanding? I promise you at Isaiah's time they had no idea that it was stretching and that it was spreading. But it is. Job 26:7 reads, he spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. Job knew, or they knew in Job time, there were you guys heard of Atlas? You know who Atlas is? Right, the guy who carries. There were times when people believed that the earth obviously set on something. Right? It couldn't just be suspended in space. But yet in Job it talks about that. And talks about spreading the skies as well. And then Job also wrote in chapter 38, verses 12 through 14, have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. I think that's amazing because I look at that picture of earth and it's beautiful. I mean, isn't that awesome? Maybe it's because that blue is my favorite color. So maybe I'm a little biased. But for him to say it stands out like a garment, like a pretty dress or whatever. I mean, you look at that and we're in awe. There are over 300 Bible verses that talk about creation. I think that we have more than enough evidence to prove that I think what the Bible says is true. God does exist. And it's the most logical explanation for how everything came to be. All right. I've gone 9 minutes longer than I had anticipated. I apologize. Which is 9 minutes is actually pretty good probably for me. So I'm going to leave you with Colossians 1, verse 16 through 17. All right, you guys want to read that? Anybody want to read that? All right. You did. Go ahead. All right. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Anybody know what that is? That is laminin. It is actually, it's a cell adhesion molecule. That is in every one of your bodies, and it keeps your cells together. Without laminin, your cells wouldn't be together. They would disperse and you would explode, basically. Isn't it ironic? I don't think it's ironic. I think God does things to show us that he exists. This is actually an actual photo of laminin. He holds us together. The Bible tells us that he does. Way to go, Brad. All right. I know that Dina had some stuff planned for some small groups. Does anybody have any questions that they'd really like to discuss, that they want to, they're dying and they need an answer for? Yeah. Why do I believe that God was a Big Bang? That's a good question, and I struggle with that at a point. I guess I don't know for sure that God was the Big Bang. I think he caused the Big Bang, let's say that. And what the Big Bang is, I don't really know, but I consider the Big Bang to be when in Genesis 1, when he said, when the Bible says he created the heavens and the earth. I think that and it may have, and God can do things that I can't explain. But I'm guessing that for him to create all that he has, it was a pretty exciting event. It was a little bit more exciting than, say, our 4th of July. And so I think that is what is now referred to. Whether or not it actually should be called the Big Bang, or if it was even a bang or an explosion, I don't know. But using that as the focal point for the beginning of the universe as we know it, I think that's what God created. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah. Oh. You asked me that earlier, and I forgot. The finches, you guys didn't know that Darwin studied. He actually took a boat and sailed all around, and he got to the Galapagos Islands. He noticed that there were different finches on the different Galapagos Islands, and he theorized that those finches resemble the same finches that are in South America, in Ecuador. So he theorized that those finches were blown, possibly in a storm, from South America to the Galapagos Islands, and then over time, as they were on their each individual island, they adapted and changed to fit the needs of that island. I don't know that I think he used that as the basis for his whole theory, and whether or not there's another animal that necessarily fits. I mean, honestly, if you wanted to, we could pick and choose. I could right here. We could stand up, and if I wanted to pull 5 of you up here, I can give pretty good reasons why it would appear that maybe some of you are evolved and some of you aren't. For example, I have glasses. Maybe my eyes haven't evolved as much as those of you that don't. For example, I'm short. For those of you that are tall, maybe you've evolved better to access things that I can't reach. I mean, I think he was observing something that I think God created, and created specifically. Talk about, you guys know the flood of Noah, right? Okay, there was a flood in which the entire world was flooded. Okay, except Noah was told by God to take 2 of every animal, put them on the ark, and then they sailed around while this world flooded, and eventually the waters receded, and they landed. My thought process is those animals are all intended. God designed them to be able to do specific things, and so after the flood, as they dispersed about the earth, they went to locations where if they couldn't survive, they didn't survive. So eventually, those would die out in those areas. And it may be a perfect example of the finches. Maybe certain finches couldn't survive because they weren't designed for that area. I mean, we see that now with animals all the time. There are certain animals that simply can't live in certain areas. Bless you. So, good question. Any other questions? Yeah. It's a good question. He asked, evolutionists think that we evolved from apes, and there are apes now, and there are us, but there's no in between. There's no ape people that are walking around. So anyway, hey, listen up. Okay, so why do evolutionists continue to believe that? Well, they think that their response is that evolution takes millions or billions of years. It takes an incredible long period of time, which I have a lot of issues with because that leaves so many gaps out there. But that as we've evolved from that single-cell organism, okay, we may have evolved from a similar ancestor as a chimpanzee. Okay, and then that ancestor doesn't exist anymore because it evolved. Part of it may have evolved to humans, and part of it may have evolved to chimpanzees. But whatever it was, we don't know because it doesn't exist, and we've never seen any proof of it. I completely understand where you're coming from. It's hard for me to follow. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's what they justify, that it was there at one point. We just don't have the evidence. Eventually we will. Any other questions? Yes? That's a good question. I wondered whether or not that would come up. Time is an issue. And depending on the interpretation of the Bible, and I know there are people that probably disagree in this room on how long that we've been around. I, for the most part, believe that we haven't been around. And I'm still, I listen to people that believe in an old earth that has been around millions and billions of years. I read the Bible, and I think we've been around about 6,000 years. And I think that if you look, for example, at the flood, and people use the different stratas of the earth to date things. And, well, this fossil was found in this layer of the earth's crust, so it must be this old. However, we've seen lots of evidence. We have, and I can't even think of what they're called, fossils that exist in multiple layers of the earth's crust. Most generally trees that fossilize, but if you look at the crust as a way to date the earth, as evolutionists do, it would say that tree was around millions and billions of years, which it couldn't have fossilized if it was. It would have rotted, it would have rotted or broken or fallen off, but it wouldn't have stayed in the place that it was. I think the flood provides us with a great, the flood provides a ton of answers to layers, to fossils. We talked about the Cambrian explosion was another thing we didn't even go to, which is where all of a sudden we have all of these fossils that we never did have before. If evolution is true, it would eventually have led up to that case. But we have all of these fossils that exist, and they never existed before. Well, how did that happen? Well, if there was a worldwide flood, a lot of things are going to happen. And it says, after the flood, God receded the waters, and they came back down. And so there's all this turbulence of all this water moving around. Land is shifting. Dirt, sediment is getting tossed and turned. And as that settles, there were a lot of animals that died in the flood. They would settle to the bottom of that flood. And as the flood is continuing, as the waters settled, as they came down off of the mountains, debris, rock, sediments are going to bury on top of those animals that have floated to the bottom. And arguably, I think it's reasonable to assume that a dinosaur would probably sink a little bit lower in that mud than perhaps a human. Yes? No, I believe they did get on the boat, actually. I believe that dinosaurs were on the boat. The Bible talks about, we go back to Job, they talk about the behemoth, right? During biblical times, they didn't know what the word dinosaur even was. That word didn't exist. But they talked about an animal called a behemoth, and if you listen to the description of it, it sounds a lot like a dinosaur to me. So I believe that the dinosaurs were on, but I think what happened is they struggled to survive in the new world after the flood. If you think about it, if the world was flooded, basically for a year, the world was flooded. Noah floated around, eventually found land. So what happens to all the vegetation? What happens to food sources for those animals? The larger animals are going to have a lot less food sources than the smaller animals. They're going to struggle to find food and to survive. And I think that's what happened. But I actually think they made the boat. Yeah. I think it was a mammoth. What's that? Similar situation. We know animals are extinct. That happens. The Bible tells us the reason why we have death is because sin was brought into the world. Adam ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and sin brought into the world. And so now we have death. So we have animals that have gone extinct. We have animals that we thought to be extinct. In fact, the coelacanth, for the longest time, evolutionists loved the coelacanth because this was one of their main number one transitional forms. It was between a fish and a land animal, the coelacanth. It was awesome. The problem was they thought this thing had been extinct for 60 billion years. We found one off the coast of Madagascar alive and well. Oops, not a transitional fossil. I said farmer. I don't know what you thought I said, but I said farmer. Not a transitional fossil, but actually a live, living animal. So, I think he probably, a situation similar with the dinosaurs or whatever. Who knows what it could have been, but eventually just didn't have the ability to survive and reproduce. Yes? Oh, that's a great question and a different topic, but here's the deal. I'll cover that real quickly because I think that's important. We say that sin enters through the man because Adam sinned. But Zach asked, didn't Eve eat from the apple first? Well, you guys remember who was created first? Adam was created first, right? And God told Adam about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And my opinion, it's not necessarily written in scriptures, that Adam then shared that information with Eve. However, Adam, as the male, head of the household, is responsible. Whether or not he shared that, we assume he told Eve that she couldn't eat from it. In fact, he told Eve not even touch it. I don't know if God told Adam that he couldn't even touch that, but that's what he told Eve. Ultimately, it was his responsibility. For all of you guys in here, you're the head of the household. It is your responsibility to be in charge of your home. As it was for Adam in the Garden of Eve. It was his responsibility. He dropped the ball. So where was he when this serpent was tempting Eve? He wasn't doing his job, was he? I joke that he must have had the TV on and was watching football and not paying attention. But obviously, so he missed the boat. It was his fault. Yeah. Okay. Remember when I talked earlier about worldview? Okay, in fact, I probably have the quote in my notes somewhere. The person that found those bones actually made that drawing because he really, 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 really wanted it to be the previous species of the whale that evolved into the whale. That's what he really wanted it to be, so that's why he drew it. And he admitted later it was a huge mistake, and now it's stuck there. But that's what he wanted, so that's why he drew. It was due to his previous worldview, what he wanted. There was a question over here. Is it done? No? You gave up on it? Okay. We're going to, I'm done. So here's what I want to do. You guys, those of you that have been here before, you know what rocking up is. But what we do at the end of the night is we all get together and we form a big circle. And this is going to be a big circle. It's going to be kind of awesome. But we form a big circle and we rock up. Some of you did it. Maybe most of you, maybe all of you did it at lunch before or at supper before we ate. But we stand in line and we're going to rock up. And then I'm going to start with a prayer, and we're going to go around in the circle. You have an opportunity to pray. If you don't want to say a prayer, that's totally fine. You don't have to pray. When it's your turn, if you don't want to say anything, just tap the person next to you, okay? And then they'll go, all right? If you do say a prayer, and then tap the person next to you. And then we'll go around the room, and it'll close with me, and then we'll be finished up. Sound good? All right, let's make a giant circle.